people who couldn't come. I just heard
This meeting is being recorded.
There's a legal disclaimer there just in case any of you are concerned. I also just heard somebody, I think somebody got a cacao message because I heard a cacao for the Koreans on here. Okay, so I think if anybody wants to volunteer, we'll just start going around. Again, I'll give you 3 minutes. I'm going to time you. If you go over 3 minutes, I might interrupt you. So try to stick to 3 minutes. I'm not going to maybe do it right away, but after like 10, 15 seconds, I'll be done. Does any group want to volunteer to go first? And otherwise, I'll start just randomly calling out groups.
I think I'll volunteer my group to go first.
You're going to volunteer your group to go first.
Group, are you guys ready to go?
I'm good.
All right.
Yep.
We're going to share a screen.
Okay, sure. Yeah, Rafaela, we'll talk. I'll give you some time at the end to do that. Because I think if they all take 3 minutes and maybe talk a couple minutes in between, we should be done in a half an hour. So.
It says host has to let us share a screen.
Yeah, hold on. I'm working on it. I'm not an expert. I think I just did it, but I'm not
okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Just FYI, Dr. Rafaela has a question in the chat.
I saw that. I just commented that I'll let her talk at the end of all these about the Chicago trip. But let's get through these because usually kids are nervous when they have to present, even if it's just a little 5-slide thing like this. So then you guys will be able to pay more attention after we do this. So.
Okay, we're going to start.
Okay. When you start talking, I start timing. So.
Can you guys see the slides?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Edam.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hello, we are group 4, and our project focus on the effects of the COVID-19 on semiconductor and motor vehicle trade and manufacturing in the United States and Korea. The image shown here is from the New York Times, taken in 2020 of the General Motors plant in Missouri. This image shows the state of the automotive industry during the pandemic in the US, where plants are full of manufactured cars unable to go to the market due to the global chip shortage. Our topic is to derive global policies to mitigate the global supply chain disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. We brainstormed the different types of industries that might have impacted by COVID-19, resulting in different industries, including masks or healthcare, semiconductors, food, and the automotive industry, so on. Among these, we decided to focus on the supply chain of automotive and semiconductor industries, since they are found to be one of the most negatively impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, as shown in the statement below. In the previous study of Hayakawa, which is the first study using the actual trade and COVID data set, they investigated the impacts of COVID-19 on global value chains by analyzing monthly trade data of finished machinery of different countries to examine how this COVID-19 disrupted trade of final goods through input and output linkage. As an extension of this study, we thought that it would be really interesting to investigate the impact of the COVID-19 to these automotive and semiconductor industries and each other, which are found to be interconnected strongly. Moreover, we are trying to compare these aspects of the United States and the South Korea, who both had considerable amounts of production and trade in automotive and semiconductor industries with very different kind of COVID-19 policy.
So obtaining the data for the project was one of the initial challenges for the team. Public data on supply chain and logistics is not readily available or without licenses or fees. The team instead did extensive research in government databases, and the data collected comes from various government agencies as well as university research groups in the US, South Korea, and the UK. COVID data for both countries came from the Our World in Data COVID-19 dataset, which integrates data from the Johns Hopkins COVID repository. Government resource data is tracked from the Oxford University's Response Tracker project, which uses 21 indicators to track policies and produce indices that measure how well the government acted upon these policies. The COVID-19 data was aggregated to monthly totals or monthly averages for the project to match the trade and manufacturing data, which only existed as monthly data. For the US, trade data came from US Census Bureau, manufacturing data came from the Federal Reserve System, and price indices came from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. South Korea has a central hub called the Korean Statistical Information Service, and although their site was difficult to navigate due to language and translation issues, data for trade, manufacturing, and price indices did exist and was extracted from the agencies listed here. Here are the features for the project, and for the project, there was 2 data sets created, one for each country. Each entry for the data set represents a date in months, with South Korea from January 2012 through January 2022, and for the US from February 2012 through February 2022. All features are numeric, and indices represent either a percentage rate or as an actual index compared to a base year. For each country, foreign trade is measured by exports and imports in dollars, and manufacturing is measured by production or production capacities. Industry prices such as producer price index, export price index, and import price index measures the prices paid for resources and raw materials by producers domestically and abroad. The COVID-19 related features can be categorized as infections or spread of the virus, testing and vaccinations or methods to combat the spread, the government response to policies related to COVID-19. And we actually want to look at hospitalizations due to COVID, but that data doesn't exist in South Korea. And as such, we had to settle for ICU patients, which is the ICU patient numbers during COVID-19. Vaccination data includes people who are vaccinated at different levels of vaccination, as well as booster shots administered. And lastly, the response indices provide a measure to compare government's response, such as stringency index, which measures the level of lockdown style restrictions or closures.
So for our EDA, we ended up splitting the data set for each country into 3 different categories. So it's COVID features, motor vehicle, and semiconductor features. And then we paired them one against the other to try to find just significant relationships. So the most came from COVID versus semiconductor features. As you can see, this came from both countries. And then in the US, there was an equal amount coming from motor vehicle features as well against COVID features. And then these are just some examples of the most correlated features that we found. You can go to the next one. So our main goal is to determine the extent of disruptions found in the supply chain of each industry due to the pandemic. In addition, to what extent the changes in the manufacturing of semiconductors affect the motor vehicle industry. Our hypothesis is just aimed to explore whether or not COVID policy restrictions negatively affected each industry, and also if the motor vehicle industry is highly dependent on the semiconductor industry. So for our methods and models, we begin by doing feature selections. We're trying to find the most salient features to go against our target variables that we find in our EDA. So we're using machine learning algorithms such as random forest, gradient boost, and support vector machines. And then we will run a multi-output or multivariate regression to try to find, determine, and analyze the relationship between the salient features and the target variables. And then we're also planning on doing a multivariate forecasting. So with interpolation. So for this, what we're going to do is simulate a COVID spike using our COVID variable or COVID variables. And then, so we're doing that with interpolation. And then from there, we are trying to predict the resiliency of each industry if there were to be a harsher COVID spike with harsher restrictions due to policies. And so one potential solution that we are proposing is to standardize the collection and logging of data by creating a database in order for agencies to monitor the trade, manufacturing, and supply chains. So one of the biggest problems that we found was just trying to find data set that was tailored towards supply chain. So like Cody explained, we ended up just taking data from different data sets and creating our own. And then we're also potentially trying to use our results from our models as analytics for each agency to see the current state of the supply chain.
Yeah, you're a little over time now, but I mean, it's good, and I like the solution there you're proposing at the end. I think like all groups, you'll notice in the feedback I gave you for the design sketch, that's something you guys need to think about more. Even think about creating some mock-ups of what these are going to look like. You know, what are people going to see, and what's the actual information that's going to be in these dashboards? How are they going to use it? That's the thing that I think you guys You probably need to put some more thought into. We all know how to do machine learning. Most of you guys have been trained. Anybody can build a model. Anybody can download a scikit, but actually returning useful, actionable information back to people so they can make better decisions. That's the hard part. Most data scientists, they're not really, they don't really have a lot of practice doing it. And as I mentioned this in the recorded lecture this week. That's the thing that I've seen so many data science projects fail, like in the real world, not in school. Well, sometimes, but in the real world in business, it's usually that last piece that people are missing. And then the project fails because nobody can make use of the model's information. So, okay, good. I wrote down a few notes. I'll give you guys some feedback on your proposal. So good. This is an interesting project because you guys may know that Biden's actually coming to Korea here in a couple of weeks, and he's supposed to meet with the new president, and he's supposed to meet with a bunch of business leaders like the heads of Samsung and LG and Hyundai. So President Biden, U.S. president, if people don't know, is coming to South Korea in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So he'll be here actually dealing with a lot of the issues you guys are talking about. So obviously these are important issues right now for both countries. So good. So who wants to go next? Or I'll call him. Good. You don't want to volunteer.
We can go.
Okay.
Gion, you want to go?
Okay.
Okay, we can go.
Okay.
Okay. I'll share my screen.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Oh.
Thanks. That's fine. Great. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. Start.
We're group 3. Our project focuses on disinformation campaigns. Next slide, please. Disinformation campaign is harmful. It's harmful to democracy. It's harmful to people and nations. For example, Ukraine. As you can see, Russia is distorting the narrative in Ukraine. Next slide, please. This is our frequency count, and as you can see, we have varieties of news from around the world. A majority of them are world news and political news. And we got our data set from Kaggle. Next, please. We did some exploratory analysis, and the feedback that we got from Dr. Bennett is that TF-IDF is the most promising. So we want to focus on that going forward. That's it. Your turn.
Okay, and that was what we have done so far. And based on this, we made a hypothesis that a fake news detection model would help the people to consume healthy news. Setting this goal, we built a methodology like this slide. As shown in the previous slide, pre-processing and vectorizing and exploratory visualization was done to determine how fake news are different with true news. And then we will use several deep learning and machine learning techniques to create a fake news detection classification model, which is related to another question: how can we detect the fake news? After the model performance evaluation, additionally, it will be conceived and proposed how this model can be used as a policy, and we will also consider and share the unexpected consequences of the policy implementation and its countermeasures. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's good. I've seen you guys like design sketches and other things, so I know a little bit more details than everybody else does. So I think the same thing I told the last group. I think for your project, Michael, Jiyoung, and the rest of your group, what's going to be really interesting is how this information is used, the actual output, because you could think about building a tool for like private citizens to actually look at so they could know while they're browsing information on the internet to figure out like, what is like real, what's disinformation. But you could also think about having multiple audiences. You could create tools for government agencies or governments to utilize while they're trying to sift through information, or they have their analysts. So I would give some thought to the output, and who's going to look at this and how is this going to help make decisions about things, right? Either private citizens, if they're browsing, the internet, that's an obvious target. But you should also maybe try to creatively think about, like, what if we gave this information back to the US Embassy in Seoul, or the Korean Embassy in Chicago, or the US Embassy in Ukraine? What exactly would they do with this information, and how would it be beneficial? I mean, we can all be like, that's fake news, that's disinformation, but what do we do about it, right? Other than just being like, that's not real. I mean, are we gonna just argue about it? I mean, that doesn't actually fix the problem. So the question, the hard part for you guys, and this is true of a lot of groups, is how are we actually going to do something about this? Like, how are we going to change anything other than just being like, that's fake, that's not fake? Like how's anything going to be different, right? And if it's not different, then we haven't accomplished anything. It's still the same. Now we just have a tool that tells us that this is the way things are, but nothing changes. Then we haven't accomplished anything. From a data science perspective, nothing's been done. We just, so that's I think the thing you guys are going to need to give some thought to is how are we going to produce some sort of tool that maybe different groups can use, and that's going to actually change something. You understand? So I would give a lot of thought to that, because I think that's the piece that the embassy and the government would be like, oh, wow, that's really cool. But it's hard, right? It's easy to build a model, to get some data and run a machine learning model. It's hard to produce actionable information that's actually going to change something, some decision that people are making. So yeah, I'll give some thought to that. Obviously, I could come up with my own ideas, but I want you guys to come up with your own ideas about what kind of tools could we create, and how could those be utilized in some way. You can think about, I come up with ideas. Think about like tools that could be used during like global crises, or like war events, or other sort of situations that could be used to intervene in these kind of situations, right? Make sense?
So
Yep.
this might be this might be a little too late for you guys, but I just heard on NPR that the FDA is trying to launch a global or a nationwide campaign about misinformation and supplements, since a lot of people are they just don't know, they really don't know how to use supplements correctly, and so it's really invading with their medication that they're currently using as well. And unfortunately, it's for a lot of elderly people as well that are getting prescribed these supplements, or are just going out to buy supplements.
Did you say FDA?
Yeah, the Food and Drug Administration, or
Okay.
agency, whatever it is.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I mean, like I said, I think what's going to be interesting for a lot of the groups is there's probably multiple audiences. You might want to build tools that private citizens can see. You might want to build tools that businesses can look at. You might want to provide information directly back to government agencies. But the question is, what are they going to do with that information, right? What exactly are they going to do with it? Like, it's got to change some decision that they're going to make, but how, right? So that's the hard part. Yeah.
Dr. Bennett, are you suggesting like to literally build tools, or are you suggesting of coming up of suggesting tools?
You can do things. You can. In the lecture for this week, I'll show you some what are called prototyping tools, or wireframing tools like Balsamic. That you, instead of, I mean, if you want to build it, you can. That would be cool. But these prototyping tools, you can kind of mock up like what a website or an app or dashboard or something would look like without actually building it. And it's actually that these mock-ups are actually interactive. You put buttons on there and the screens move, but they're pretty simple to use. Like I've had our freshmen learn how to use them and build prototypes or things. So you guys can definitely do it.
Okay,
So,
thank
yeah.
you. I thought you meant build real tools. Okay, great.
Well, I mean, you can, but that's going to take a lot of time. What I would suggest is making prototypes, creating visualizations. Watch the lecture for this next week, and I show you how to do this. Okay. So, but I'm just going to keep beating this into your heads that we have to produce actionable information. If all we have is a model, in data science, if all we've done is built a model, then we've accomplished nothing. And I'm going to beat this into your heads until, well, my own students, they've already had it beaten into their heads. If all we have is a model, we haven't done anything. We have to produce actionable information, and we have to produce a way to deliver it back to the decision makers so that it changes their decision, right? So otherwise we've accomplished nothing. So that's always the hard part. So next group, who wants to go?
We
Good
can
job.
go next.
Okay.
Okay, hi, we are group 5 and our topic is providing foreign aid. Our main question is how and where we should give foreign aid be targeted to return the biggest benefit. And related questions are followed on this. So we answer those questions to make the specific direction of our project. After we studied about several types of foreign aid, we determined it to focus on aid for economic development that fulfills recipients' needs and donors' gain at the same time. Then it leads to another question. If the answer is no, we don't need to stick to it. But fortunately, there is a markable case, and Gerardo will keep talking about it.
So the overall approach we decided on afterwards is to create a classification based on Korea's composition of GDP over the decades. And the reason we chose Korea is because they are the only country that has gone from being a recipient country to a donor company. They're the only country that's ever been upgraded from developing to developed country. So obviously they've done things correctly in a way that's allowed them to grow in a phenomenal way. So we are looking at taking existing developing countries and classifying how their GDP is composed and comparing it to the historical composition of Korea's GDP. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Now, some of the challenges that we see or that make this project difficult are challenges and non-challenges. For example, a non-challenge we view as Minka, or one of the things that allowed Korea to be prosperous, this community-based development. This community-based development is simply based on the mindset of citizens in the country. Now, what's an actual challenge? In the US law, foreign aid can't fund any competing industries. So obviously, if we look back at Korea's history, when they needed aid to fund their steel industry, if that was today, the US would be able to provide zero funding because it's a competing against US industry. And so this is kind of some of the interesting dynamics revolved around what we consider challenges and non-challenges. Next slide. Now, as far as our output, we're looking at having two outputs. One's going to be a dashboard that is going to allow us to enter a country's GDP composition today, and it's going to return to us what decade it most closely resembles Korea's GDP. And the second approach we're considering is that there is a lack of tracking the impact of foreign aid over time going forward. There's good tracking of how dollars are dispersed, but poor tracking of the impact and the ripples it has. So we're looking at creating a digital ticket system that could potentially allow us to track how money is distributed over the years after it is inserted into a country. Any questions? Or that's the end.
No questions right now. I'll give you guys some feedback. And when we do the final presentation, I will ask questions. So you should go and plan on having me ask tricky questions, because you guys know I like to ask tricky questions. I do like what you're proposing, Jardo, and I'd say, and the rest of your group with the, and you guys may have noticed, I don't know if you were paying attention to the other groups, what they were talking about is there's some data that's missing, and what they're proposing, I guess some of the other groups mentioned this, Nick or maybe Carlos, I can't remember, proposed something similar, but they're actually talking about building a system that will allow us to generate data so we can answer the question better in the future. And that's something that for some of the other groups may be a consideration as well. We may be missing the information we need to actually produce actionable information to help decision makers. And if so, then maybe we need to think about doing some data engineering to create a system to collect the data. So I think Gerardo was talking about maybe creating some kind of way to track the foreign aid and then be able to link it more directly to the actual economic growth that it produces, which is an interesting idea, actually. And if it doesn't exist, then that is obviously an area of opportunity. If we go back and propose that to the US Embassy or the US State Department, they might be like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Here's a bunch of money, build it for us. So those are interesting ideas to think about how we could get additional data to do it. So I think that's good. I like what you guys were talking about there. I'm interested to see in the next month what you guys actually are able to produce, at least in terms of prototypes. Obviously, we're not going to build all this, but in terms of prototypes. So, okay, good. How about the next group? 2 more groups and we're done.
I guess we'll go.
Okay.
I will share my screen.
Okay.
I can figure this out.
Yeah, it says Zoom's always tricky.
The same. Oh, here it is. All right. All right. So we, our project is on climate change, and we're addressing how we could reduce reliance on fossil fuels along with coal-fired plants and expand renewable energies and accelerate the transition from combustible engine vehicles to electric and hydropower vehicles. So far in our EDA analysis, we have looked at different sources of energy around the world. And you can see coal is the biggest, followed by gas, which are why we want to reduce our reliance on coal-fired plants along with fossil fuels. And we also looked at differences between different countries. And you can see in terms of different greenhouse gas emissions by different sectors. And you can see differences between the United States and South Korea. First, you can see the energy for South Korea is trending upward a lot more than the United States. Seems leveled off. And then there's some differences in order between the sectors producing the most greenhouse gas emissions. So in addition to different sectors, we also looked at different energy subsectors, which includes a different set of differences like electricity and heat and manufacturing and transportation. And we also are planning on looking at, not planning, we also are noticing differences between the economies of different countries. So we're going to examine how different states in the economy and different sources of sectors and energy subsectors influence different ways how a country should best transition. So some of our next steps, Sung Choi will talk about.
Yeah, so from what we've done, we're gonna do exploring relations between greenhouse gas emission sources and the economy in each countries. And also we're gonna determine best way to reduce reliance on coal-fired plants and industrial use of fossil fuels, along with expand renewable energy. From this, we can drive some kind of energy transition model. Also, we're gonna explore the best way transition to electric vehicle based on each country's EV infrastructure. After all this are done, we're gonna design some kind of interactive app or website to make our outputs easily accessible to some government officers or even industry business people or anyone who's very interested in climate change issues. All right, I think we're done. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, I mean, one thing I would suggest with you guys is, and you heard the speaker last Friday talk about this, is also consider maybe creating a tool for private citizens. I mean, one of the problems in Korea is there's a lack of awareness about environmental problems. And I think that's an area of opportunity. But honestly, even in the United States, that can be improved too. I mean, everywhere in the world, I mean, that's something that can be improved in. And so if you guys could kind of link individual citizens' behaviors to kind of these changing patterns in like energy use or, sort of, types of energy use or whatever, or increased energy use, you might help people. I think one of the problems is people don't clearly connect their day-to-day actions to the amount of energy that's used in their community. And that energy then leads to pollution being released and then leads to misamunchi. So people just leave the doors at, here at the university all the time. It pisses me off so much. They leave the doors wide open with the heat on, but and I'm always like, but it doesn't do any good for me to yell at them in Korean, even though I think it's funny. The problem is they can't connect their own actions to the effects. And so that's an area where you could think about, along with all the things you're talking about for government officials and business people, is we need some way for people at all levels to more clearly connect their actions, their choices, their decisions to what the effects are. And it's really difficult for most people to do that in some issues. And this is a perfect example. In these environmental issues or energy use issues, it's really hard for people to connect. Like, if I just leave this door open, this window open, the actual effect. And that's an area of opportunity for you guys to think about. How could we do that in a data-driven way? How could we kind of help people understand? And it's hard, but that's why data scientists get paid so much money. So because we solve the hard problems through data, right? So I would just give it some thought, see what you can come up with, but that's good. I think you guys got a good start on your plan. Okay, so last group is going to be group 2. So
let me start.
Yep.
We are group 2 and our topic is climate change effects on food insecurity. Next slide. In more detail, climate change is continually affecting our current crop production and also changing conditions such as rising water levels are forcing migration. These several factors can change an individual's ability to secure proper nutrition. In other words, with changing climate, the food security of citizens will also begin to worsen. So we want to explore the effects of climate change mainly in respect to the food insecurity of different countries. Next slide. So we wanted to understand if there were specific variables we can utilize to predict how food insecurity would change from the effects of climate change. We used Global Food Security Index from Economist Intelligence Unit and noticed that there are 5 variables that have a strong correlation with food security. We've identified some of these variables as predictors of food insecurity. Next slide. And also, we began work on estimating future state of predictors in simulated climate. Future environment data comes from NASA CMIP6 simulation dataset, which contains geolocation data over time for various climate factors. Yes.
Great. Thanks. So what we plan to do going forward is we essentially want to create time series models that will be able to generate predictions for the food insecurity predictors that we mentioned earlier. So the idea is to take the data from NASA, which is they've generated simulations of what the future climate will be like if things continue the way they have been. From this, we have historical data of crop production, how unemployment is affected, as well as migration. So we want to take this simulation data and then make estimations on how all of these factors are going to change. And then from our model that we've built previously, we can see what the food insecurity is estimated to be for that country's rank, or based on that index, how this will be affected based off of these three models. And then we plan on having some data visualizations of the model outputs. So here's like an outline from another paper that we read, where they gave kind of a sketch of how they've come across presenting this data. They did it on a, it's not county, but whatever it is in the United Kingdom is level. We would do it on a global level, since that's what most of the data we have is based off of. And we want to create visualizations for model results for policymakers to view what the future effects on their country and possibly countries they provide aid to would be, as well as provide interactive use for users to see like what the effects would be from questions like, if we reduce the surface temperatures by 1 degree next year, how would this affect the food insecurity?
Okay, good. Yeah, very good. I mean, so I think that's interesting. I think it's an interesting problem that to take climate change and focus on food insecurity. So I thought that was an interesting angle you guys chose. So it'll be interesting to see what you and Yejin and the rest of your team come up with there. I like kind of some of the ideas around the output, the visualization, and the kind of connection between food insecurity and migration is actually really interesting, because obviously that's what's driving a lot of the immigration, both legal and illegal immigration, is due to people, the food insecurity and the economic insecurity. So it's interesting that you're dealing with some of this underlying issues. So so good. Yeah. And again, I think you guys were the one group that did give a little bit more thought to the output. But obviously there's still a lot of room there to expand upon what you're doing. If we can still your screen back here, kill it now. Okay. So for all the groups, what I'd say is pay attention to the feedback I gave you in your design sketches in your proposal, which is due next Wednesday. I think we said it before the Koreans head to Chicago. Basically, you're going to want to kind of follow the directions in the syllabus, but basically some of the feedback I'm giving you on the design sketch and on the EDA stuff, you're going to want to kind of add those things in and then make kind of a proposal. We have basically a month to put this all together. I think you guys have done a great job so far. I'm pretty pleased. I think all the faculty are pretty pleased with what you've done. But now this next month is like kind of the grand finale. We got to put everything together and actually run the models, create some sort of output interfaces and all this kind of stuff. But hopefully it'll be a good exercise for you, because hopefully this will give you guys a chance to see, like, at least in my experience, I was a data scientist for 15 years. In my experience, this part is the part that they don't really teach in school, is kind of putting everything together and then creating some sort of output for people to actually see and use. And the only way to really learn how to do it, the reason they don't teach it in school is the only way to learn how to do it is to do it. It's like you got to just hands-on, like, create things and be creative and stuff. And the more you do it, the better you get. So hopefully over the next few weeks, this will be a good experience for you guys. If you haven't done it, some of you guys maybe have done some of this in the past, but if you haven't, this will be a good chance to kind of improve on that part of your data science skill set. Also, we're excited to see what you guys come up with. So, so with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Rafaela to talk about the Chicago trip. Like I mentioned, all you guys put some more thought into the output. How are we going to, data science is all about changing human decision making. So how is your project, how are you going to change somebody's decisions? Because otherwise we haven't accomplished anything. So with that said, also, like I mentioned in the lecture for this next week, I talk about some ways of doing this, some prototyping tools, some wireframing tools. So go watch that, because I'll show you how my students in the past have done this so that you guys can maybe use some of those same things. Okay. Raphael.
So, hello everyone. Morning and good night. So I'm here to answer questions as well from the students from South Korea, because I'm sure you guys may have some questions. I believe, I know we shared the schedule. So you should have received the emails from Anisha Patel. She's the student that is helping us coordinate. She's awesome, and you're gonna meet her at the airport. So she's gonna greet you at your arrival, and then there is transportation already coordinated, and we'll take you to the hotel. You'll probably be super tired, and that's gonna be Friday, and then Saturday is a free day, and then we have a boat tour on Sunday afternoon. I heard from Casey that mornings are not gonna be good for you guys, so I know it's gonna be, you'll be jet lagged for a little bit, for a few days. Drink a lot of water, apparently. That what helps. Anisha we are preparing a bunch of information for you all. So we will have printouts, maps, information about things to do in Chicago, restaurants to go to, anything like that. You will have my cell phone number, and we are there for you to help you guys if you have any questions. Or so we will, you guys are going to have our number, so if there is any emergency, you can call us. Okay. And other than that, we're gonna then meet at DePaul. There will be instructions how to get to DePaul. It's walking distance, or you can take the train, like the subway in Chicago, which we call DL. And you're gonna be given a Ventra card. That's the card you use to ride the train and public transportation. It's the same buses or the subway trains. They all have the same. I'm sure it's the same in Seoul.
It's the same. It's called a T-Money card here.
Yeah, right. So it's
T-Money
like
card here.
every city in the world. It's that way. The hotel rooms are gonna be 2 or 3 people per room. So we booked 4 rooms, right? That's right. Yeah, I think it's in the downtown area. It's really close to Michigan Avenue, which is where all the fancy stores are. Close enough to the lake. The weather is gonna be it's getting nicer. So, but as I said in my email, or I think Anisha sent you that email, the weather in Chicago is extremely unpredictable, as we all know. It's rainy and cold right now, but it's gonna be 80 next week. So who knows? Do you guys do Fahrenheit or Celsius? Celsius. Okay. So it's about 10 degrees right now, but next week it's gonna be 28 degrees Celsius. So it's gonna be hot. But what happens when you arrive? So make sure to check the weather, bring something for the evening, something warm, comfy shoes, but you guys are probably all wearing gym shoes anyway, like my kids. And yeah, and then we're gonna have visits. We have Microsoft on Monday, IBM on Tuesday. A bunch of other people are coming. They'll do talks on through Zoom, because again, it is still COVID situation. So some companies we were hoping to visit Google, but their current policy is that they're not sending anyone to sites, and they don't allow anyone on site. So in the United States, a lot of companies are slightly going back to the office, but it's still, it's still not 100% for sure. I want you guys, and then also the Chicago students, Cody, sorry, we're gonna miss you. And for everyone else, you are welcome to come. Carlos, what did you decide? You'll be in Chicago?
Yeah, I'm flying on Saturday the 14th.
Okay, perfect. So we have a room in the Daily Building that is being booked for all of you guys. So there is it's a kind of big workshop space. with tables. So I know Casey said this is going to be the last month, a lot of work. So there will be time if groups wants to meet. You guys can continue to work on the projects. We'll actually meet in person for the first time. Yeah, so the week is a mix of meetings with industry leaders and as well as free time. And we're also having a meet and greet with the Asian, the global students of the Global Asian Studies at DePaul. That want to welcome you. These are students that are learning about Asia, and they're actually taking a K-pop class right now. And so they're really excited to meet you guys. And so we're having a little get together and scavenger hunt in the Lincoln Park area, which is a really pretty campus of DePaul. So DePaul has 2 separate campuses. So we're going to have one afternoon in the Lincoln Park campus. Yeah, so I want to know I want to hear if you guys have any questions. None?
Any of the Korean students have any particular questions right now about the trip that you want to ask? Of course, if not, they can always email us later.
And you can ask Casey, because obviously you know well enough about Chicago, but
yeah, I've lived in both places, so yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Will there
So
be sorry, will there be like shuttles or transportation to like IBM, Microsoft?
It's actually walking distance. They're all downtown.
Oh, okay.
So well, Microsoft is on Randolph. So it's like 15 minutes away. And then IBM, I'm not completely sure if it's in the Willis Tower or if it's in a different location. So, but it is in the city. So yeah, otherwise we would coordinate for transportation. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. And you know, guys, that you will have a very early wake up for the Korean students going back, because you have an early flight. So you'll be picked up around 4:30 a.m. on the day that you're leaving. So
I already told them, here's the strategy for this, Koreans. Like, if you just stay up all Saturday night and sleep on the plane, you'll automatically be back on Korean time.
Right.
So that I've done this trip back and forth, and you just stay up all night that Saturday night, have a good time, and then just go to the airport and sleep on the plane. And then when you get back, you just boom, be back. No jet lag. Yeah.
And I'm sure they'll have some, they'll have fun on that Saturday night. It's their last night in Chicago. So
don't lose any.
I'm not losing them. They're adults. They're on
also
their
the
own.
Chicago students, take good care of them and don't lose any of the Koreans. Send them back to us.
Yeah, if there is any, obviously, COVID is, we know that we're all in this weird situation. So if any, if you guys, we will coordinate for. Do you need to be tested to go back? We'll have to figure that out.
They do need to be tested to go back right now. They're some of the airlines are arguing about dropping it, but they still haven't, which is kind of crazy, honestly. But yeah, they'll have to be tested to go back. So you need to.
We will coordinate that. We have a few places on campus.
Yeah, for Korea, it's 48 hours. So it's not the day before. So you actually have 2 days, but there's a time limit. You got to look at the time they leave and do it within 48 hours of the departure time. And I think it has to be the departure time of their flight to Korea. So you have to look at the time they leave from Seattle. That'll be the flight that counts, I think. I don't know. You'll need to check. You might need to call the airline and ask.
Right.
It's very confusing.
Okay. It is always very confusing, isn't it? Hopefully for the American students, this will not be as crazy. But
hopefully the rules will change. But yeah, I mean, the rules, it's just a pain in the butt right now with all the tests.
But for the American students, we're gonna for the DePaul students, they're gonna get the Abbott self-test for when they're coming back to the United States, so they can just use an app.
Okay, but that has to be like proctored or something to use.
Yeah, but I did it many times. It's so easy. Yeah, you just do an app. They look at you doing the self-test, and you're good to go. Yeah.
Okay, that makes it easy enough. Yeah, we're still watching and waiting.
For
We're trying
you
to
guys.
decide when they get here. Because when they get, what's ridiculous here in Korea is you gotta get tested before you come and after you come. So we're still waiting. We're hoping they'll drop that rule before the US students come, but we'll find, we'll see. If not, you guys are gonna get a lot of shit stuck up your nose.
Yeah, so anyway, so we will coordinate the testing, and I think it's PCR testing for Korean students, correct?
It is
No,
currently
antigen.
still. Hopefully, I mean, hopefully that changes, but they haven't changed it yet. I mean, hopefully it changes by June for the US students.
No,
but
I'm talking
Korean
about
students,
the students from Korea. Okay, so it's
Yeah, and for
PCR.
Korea, it has to be a PCR, yeah. It can be a rapid PCR as long as it says like PCR, NAAT, or whatever on the test. I know places in Chicago to get them done if you guys don't know one. There's one near the airport that's pretty simple and easy to go to and quick
Yeah,
to-
we have this physician, some immediate care that it's all over Chicago. So
you just have to make sure they get the result back in time. That's the one question, because it has to be done and the result needs to be returned quickly enough, you know.
Though if they do the rapid PCR, that will be in 15 minutes.
Yeah, you just need to make sure it actually says PCR on the test, otherwise they won't accept it. It has to literally say on the piece of paper PCR, NAAT, whatever. I don't know.
Right. Anyway, so hopefully we will all be done with that easily and no challenges, but we do have backups in that case. If you need to stay a little longer with us. Yeah, bring masks, even though there is no mask requirement in Chicago. I think it's still, you know, especially if you're using public transportation, you want to feel more comfortable. It's kind of you'll see people walking around with masks or no mask is becoming like a personal choice. But I think it's good to bring masks. We also have masks on campus if you need extra.
They just now dropped the mask mandate in Korea outside. You still have to wear it inside, but I would say 80% of people here are still wearing them. So I don't think the Koreans will have a problem wearing masks. Although I would say wearing masks outside in the United States is a lot less frequent, it seems like, when I've been there. So
yeah, most likely you'll see more people wearing masks indoor than outdoors.
Yeah, we don't really see many people wearing masks outdoors anymore in the US.
No, in the city you see them actually. You see quite a few.
You still wear it in California.
Of course.
It's still required in LA.
Oh, really?
Is it?
Yeah,
Indoor
they reinstated it.
Right. I mean, yeah, there's been an uptick recently of cases. And then the other thing is obviously, and I'm assuming that's the same in Korea, make a copy of or take a photo of your vaccine card. For most places, like 100% of the places in Chicago, you don't need to actually show the card, you just need to show the photo.
They need to, for entering the US as a non-citizen, they have to actually, they need like a thing in English with the vaccine thing. So what I told them to do is go to the local public health center and they'll print out in English your vaccination record. And they will need that. Yeah, I know that if you're not a citizen, it's tricky going into the US though. You need to actually show like proof of vaccination. The easiest thing is, at least as a Korean, the easiest thing is go to the public health center and they will print you out a piece of paper and just carry that with you. Take a picture of it just in case you lose it. So you have a picture on your phone, but yeah, take that with you. I've already told them some of this stuff. So they
okay. Well, I mean, I don't know about your, I don't even know what you guys get when you get vaccinated, if you get our stupid white card.
No,
or
they have
something a little more fancy.
They have an app. They have the
Weird.
COV app here. Yeah.
Like the rest of the world. Okay, so I think that's it. If you guys have any last minute question, you have my email. So
I have a question. I haven't received any emails from Anisha so far. I think my email address is missing. Can you check this, please?
Absolutely. Can you put your email in the chat so that I can check with Anisha? Casey, did you miss Ianso?
What's
that-
what's on the list? What's on the list? Because actually on the list I email. Which have you been getting emails from me about stuff for the program?
Sorry?
Did you get emails from me like last week about like getting tested and stuff?
Oh, yeah, I received.
Okay. She's on the
Let me-
list. Yeah. She's on the
Okay,
list.
let me double check with Anisha. I'll talk to her tomorrow for sure.
Thank
And
you.
we'll trying to send you whatever you missed.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I
you're
mean,
welcome.
obviously Yejin or Jiyoung can forward it to her. So Yejin, Jiyoung, help her out.
Good.
All right, so guys.
El
right.
Batakasu.
Okay, dokers. Anyway, look
Okay.
forward to meeting you in person.
Yeah, it's exciting. So yeah, I guess this will be the last time we meet, and then in a week they're all going to be there. You guys are going to be in charge of them. So hopefully the Koreans are all excited. Chicago's a great city, as we've
It
said
is a
many
great
times.
city.
It's really fun, and
Yep.
yeah, you guys will hopefully have a good time. So
Yep, you'll have a good time. Bye, everyone.
week. Talk to you soon. Yep. Everybody have a nice week. I guess you guys all see each other in Chicago soon. So.
Bye-bye.